Good morning, Anto.
Hi, good
Welcome,
morning, Ken.
welcome to our first ever automated buildings video interview. As you're aware, we normally just do an email interview, but today we're going to try and step it up a little bit and get with the times. And we're going to try and learn more about your Padi. Will you speak to that?
I would be happy to speak to that. It's great to chat with you rather than writing it all down in an interview. I'm looking forward to having this chat with you. So where do you want to start?
Well, why did you create Padi? What is it? Why did you do it?
Why did I do it? Well, I've been building integration platforms for 30 years, right? So the first one I did was in 1989, believe it or not. Integration platform called the CDC engine in UK and Europe. It was used quite widely there. Built a number along the way since then. About 2 years ago, I started to think about what integration could look like in the age of the internet, right? Because all of the previous platforms were really may have used internet, but not really sort of focused on the internet. So Padi is a platform that really sort of is born in the age of the internet. That's kind of how we'll describe it. And it's sort of has evolved into quite a platform with some really cool innovation over the last couple of years.
And how is it different than some of the integration platforms we have? There seems to be a fair amount of folks that are kind of dabbling in that area.
Yeah, so integration platforms have one common sort of architectural sort of aspect that I've seen ever since I created the first one back in '89, and that is basically the concept of me being the integration platform in the middle, right? So all of the sort of platforms that you see today is basically that same kind of architecture. Bring the data to me, I will normalize it, and I will shove it out the other end so that other systems can deal with it. So it's kind of a gateway data normalization. Padi doesn't have that sort of integration engine that's in the middle. Padi actually uses the internet to do the integration. So there's no drivers involved in Padi. There are applications and other sort of aspects of it in terms of how to manage it, but that's really sort of key to the difference, because anybody that's ever created a driver knows that it's not easy.
And it's ever changing is the other problem with drivers.
That's right.
You always have to be upgraded, and that's very annoying.
Yeah.
So you're using something called Connection Profiles. Tell us a bit what that is.
So that's innovation that we created about 18 months ago. Basically, what Connection Profile does is it creates an integration use case based profile of how two entities need to communicate with each other. If you take one entity and another entity in a traditional integration sort of mechanism, if those two don't speak a common standard protocol, right, they need to go through some kind of gateway that or sort of engine that will actually transform all of the information. With connection profiles, you don't have that. What you have is you have connection profiles that define what these two entities really need to do to perform some function that we need out of it, right? And all of that information is codified and actually put into the connection profile as a specification of how these two should communicate to perform a particular function. And the connection profile then tells the devices involved how to communicate using whatever protocol or whatever ontology that they need to, that they're most comfortable with.
Does the connection profile sometimes prove that the connection is not possible?
Well, if there is no connection, if the two entities want to talk to each other, have a need, but there is no connection profile, then they cannot communicate, right? So a connection profile would have to be created for that sort of scenario, right? But the way connection profiles are being sort of adopted, and the thinking behind them is that they become the focus of creating these profiles when you think about the use cases. And if you sort of think about what people do in terms of architecting a sort of a complex system, a lot of it is based on use cases, right? So that's kind of where we start from there. If there's a use case to connect one to another, then a connection profile can be created and be used.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarity. So what's the role of the connection profile and Padi in the digital twin environment?
Well, one of the really sort of intriguing things about digital twin is really that it's an integration problem, right? Digital twin is really the overlaying of a virtual infrastructure over physical assets that we know, including buildings. That's a very key part of it. And how all of these different sort of systems that are being used in buildings and other assets, infrastructure, smart cities and things, how the digital twin is all about how they get connected together, right, to actually create something better than the components, the silos, right? So it is, you know, a massive integration challenge. And that's what really sort of attracted me to digital twins, because it's very similar to the journey that I've had integrating different building systems together, just as at a larger scale.
So what would be involved to have the industry get involved and adopt connection profiles? It almost sounds like an evolving new standard, connection profiles.
Yeah, so what's involved is the creation of these connection profiles, which is just a document. Right, the connection profile itself is just a specification of a document of how A talks to B for the purpose of X, whatever X is. Right, so most of the actual data flow between A and B can actually be utilizing anything that's pre-existing, whether it's Haystack or BACnet web services, or even BACnet or other protocols. It really doesn't matter. So connection profile is kind of the definition of how each specific instances of integration is to be performed. So the creation of those use cases, which is then turned into connection profile, is essentially the task involved.
Do you existingly have, or do you now have a specification or a request for requirement of what a connection profile needs to be?
The specification really needs to come out of a use case, right? So use case, this is actually, a lot of this is going on right now in the Digital Twin Consortium. A use case could be something like, you know, how does a train ticket machine communicate to a lighting system so that lights can come on when somebody buys a ticket, right? So that's a simple, very simplistic and maybe even silly kind of use case, but that very, very clearly defines the two endpoints and the purpose. So out of that kind of use case that is very specific, you can then create a connection profile for both the ticket machine and the lighting system.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit more how the connection profile would work with Haystack or other ontologies.
Part of the meat of connection profiles are these sort of attributes or properties that define what each side need to provide to have this successful communication between it and the other end for the purpose intended, right? So in something like Haystack, Haystack has an API mechanism as part of it. So part of the connection profile will deal with the communication sort of parameters, where the Haystack server is, maybe other protocols and security credentials may actually need to be defined within the connection profile for that particular profile. But then you can also put within the connection profile specifics about what you actually want from that server, right? And what you actually what are you looking for from the context of the client that's trying to extract that data out of the Haystack server, right? So we haven't actually done the one for Haystack. We're very keen to do one with Haystack, connection profile for Haystack, but that's kind of the mechanics of it. Is you start with why do you need this communication, and then delve into the protocol mechanisms that's needed, and then define that. And that the definition could be very broad, or it can actually be very narrow. The ticket system example is very narrow, but other definitions could be quite broad.
So we've got the Haystack event coming up in early May. Is there any possibility that you could at least have some prototype work to show folks?
I'm hoping to do so. Digital Twin is one of the the topics that Haystack Connect wants to cover, and I have submitted a suggestion to cover connection profile as part of the conference, so I hope so.
And you'll be doing that presentation?
I suspect I will be, yes.
Great. Okay, that's good news.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know you do a lot of work in cybersecurity. So how do they help or hinder cybersecurity?
It helps. It helps because the connection profile not only can accommodate the sort of the parameters necessary for communication, but it can also provide a mechanism where you would define other attributes, business rules kind of attributes, as well as cybersecurity keys, licenses, and other sort of mechanics that's necessary for A to talk to B, right? So all of that, and you know, everything in connection profile is metadata, right? So connection profile is all about managing that metadata between A and B. Mm-hmm. So part of that metadata that connection profiles can be defined to have is or are cybersecurity sort of information such as keys and credentials and other attributes.
And how does the connection profile work with BACnet and the new managed BACnet standard?
The specifics are TBD because on managed BACnet it's obviously still evolving as work is going on by that consortium. But we think the key part of managed BACnet is this entity called the local network and security manager, which actually sits in the building. That kind of is the sort of the core of managed BACnet. So I foresee connection profiles that will actually allow the communication or integration into or out of those local manager devices. But as yet is undefined because we're not quite at that stage of actually looking at data integration from it, but I see a lot of promise in it.
Okay, I think I'm beginning to understand. So what I got out of this is that I need two ingredients. I need Padi, which I assume is an online open service. I guess I need to know better how I purchase and pay for that. And then the second one is that I need to get my head around creating connection profiles. And maybe you can expand a little bit on the language used and how one might go about that.
Okay. First of all, to clarify the sort of relationship between Padi and connection profiles, while we did create connection profile about 18 months ago, we decided that it is so good that it needs to be out in the public. Right, so we put it into the public domain. It's now open source. That's the mechanism by which we put it into the Digital Twin Consortium as an open source connection mechanism. So connection profile itself is designed to be open, right? So the connection profiles that are created will be a connection profile created by all manner of people in the open. So that's got you know, it's not directly related to Padi, although Padi is involved because Padi is one of the entities that a connection profile requires a thing called a broker that actually establishes the connection and manages the connection over time. So Padi is a broker for connection profiles, and because connection profile is open, we anticipate there'll be other companies creating brokers that have different use cases and different sort of user interface and different kind of models. So the two are separate. Padi itself is a cloud platforms that natively does connection profile because it kind of is where it started, and is really designed to be a general purpose broker. It in many ways it is a digital twin, is the creation of a digital twin. In the cloud, and a digital twin that in a way doesn't is not impeded by any sort of functionality, because Padi doesn't do anything specific like analytics or data gathering or data normalization or any of those. Padi is just a mechanism to manage connection profiles and other integrated user interface to achieve sort of a single pane of glass.
So connection profile is kind of a new concept for the industry. Somehow it seems like it could almost use a article of its own to better explain. if we want to learn more about that now, where do we go? To the Digital Twin Consortium, or what's the best?
Well, people are most welcome to join the Digital Twin Consortium. There's a lot of conversation about integration and lots of other sort of issues, as well as connection profile that's being discussed as a key integration mechanism within the DTC. Recently there's a paper from Harbour Research on connection profiles, which I think your readers will enjoy reading. I am also doing quite a number of webinars and sort of other events where we'll be talking about connection profiles over the next few weeks. Anybody that has have any sort of serious interest about connection profile, please do reach out to me at anto@padi.io. Happy to talk.
Okay, and I also understand as part of this, our first video interview, that we are going to have some verbiage wrapping it. Can you include links in those in that verbiage to help people kind of, once they get the concept, to, if they want to kind of buy into it? Almost what we need, I think, is like these are the 10 steps you need to get your product ready for connection profiles, or something like that.
Yeah, it's actually 4 steps involved. We actually did, as part of the DTC work, we did a sort of life cycle of a connection profile kind of view of how do you create it, how do you develop products with it, how do you install it, and how do you maintain it over the decades. So those are kind of the 4 steps.
Where does that reside now?
It resides in a slide deck that I can...
Can you link us to that or not yet?
Yeah, I can link to that. I can also put together a video that actually sort of become a narrative to that, because it needs a little bit of explaining as it goes through. So I'm happy to commit to putting together a video to explain that.
Maybe that's our May interview.
Okay.
This is our April interview. Maybe our May interview. Now you've introduced the topic. Now you can explain a little bit more about connection profiles.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to add to this interview?
No, I think that's great. Looking forward to see how the building industry can really do 2 things. One is sort of use connection profiles and that sort of mechanism to integrate, but also really seriously think about digital twin and whether that's sort of an interesting way to think about automation and control sort of in the decades to come.
Have you had any interest in having it interface with Hey Google and Alexa and any of the sort of the home automation platforms? Or
I've had interest myself because my house is full of Google devices. I've not had any sort of actual dialogue or activities to actually create it, but I can certainly see opportunities there, and it, structurally it wouldn't be very difficult.
Is the way, I too use Google Home and have quite a few devices. In fact, I pride myself in buying a different device every time so I can see, and I'm amazed at the ease of integration. Is that what we actually do in Google Home? Is that the start of a connection profile? Is that sort of that kind of a concept? Basically it understands that this device exists, and I click on it, and the 2 of them seem to chat it up, and then I push the button, and magically I can then connect it to Google Home. So is that sort of like, if it just coming into this and you're trying to understand, is that sort of that kind of relationship that's going on?
I'm sort of thinking here what the use cases are, right? Because connection profiles start with a use case, right? Yeah. And that's very important, because use cases is really the measure of value, right? When you have a use case, it is somebody or some groups of people wanting to connect some devices for some purpose, right? So you're only really doing something when there is a purpose for doing that. So it would be interesting to sort of explore what the use cases are that could be interesting for sort of voice commands and I know some people that sort of working in that space, people like Keith and Keith Gibson and others, and I'll have a useful conversation with them and see if we can extract a use case, develop it into a connection profile, and implement something.
But isn't the simple use case is we want to turn on the light, and then the connection we want is we want to be able to, hey Google, turn on the light. Is it that simple or not? I mean, it gets more complicated as you want to do more complicated things, but that's probably a good place to start.
It could be. That's the sort of the equivalent of a hello world kind of writing code. Yeah. So yeah, that will be a good start. And I think we'll take your suggestion on that.
Yeah, well, the power is kind of amazing, because then you can say, turn on the light red, turn on the light, all of a sudden by just attributes, we seem to be able to build interest. I'm totally fascinated by that as a guy like you who's been in the control industry forever and know the pain that we've gone through to integrate some of this stuff, and just to see how they've kind of worked around, a whole bunch of complicated stuff. And they obviously have some kind of a specification written that if you want to talk to us, this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
And so do you kind of see Padi evolving that direction, that to talk to Padi, you need to do these 4 things, maybe, as you're going to tell us, but maybe there's a few more things.
Yeah, again, the use cases drive everything. Is the way I think about it. I'm not sure Talking to Padi is kind of the way to think about it. It's really talking to the building or talking to something, right? Padi is just in facilitating
Paddy's a handler.
Paddy's a handler. Paddy's managing the sort of integration, right? So you don't really talk to it as such. You talk through it.
How do we buy Padi, or how does Padi get?
So for
make a living.
Yeah, so for sort of the early use cases of developers developing products and apps to put on the Padi app store and make it work with the rest of Padi and Connection Profile, the platform is available to be used for no cost. Our business model is that what we want people to do is to create apps that they then sell through Padi. Right, so it becomes a marketplace for apps and also marketplace for integration, right? So you may have an app that somebody would then install by using Padi, and it is you that's sort of deciding that it's going to cost $25 a month for your app to be used by the user, and then we facilitate that as a marketplace. We take a platform fee out of that, but the bulk of the revenue goes to you. So we're really facilitating an app-based marketplace using Padi, obviously leveraging connection profiles in the process.
Kind of following the Apple model.
Yes, I would prefer the Google Android model, but we can have that debate as well.
Yeah, but okay, that's interesting. So, but in the Apple model, Apple actually owns the app. Do you see you owning?
No, because when you create an app in Padi, the app is essentially typically a pre-existing cloud service or a pre-existing device that's actually doing the work, the bulk of the work. The app framework within Padi just provides mechanism to put that app into Padi so a user can consume it and connect through it. Right. So it's the mechanism of actually putting an app in Padi is actually very lightweight.
And a lot more open and free for the developer, because that became the problem. Yes. For developers, whether they would develop Android or whether they would develop.
Right. And that's why I said I prefer the sort of the Android model.
Understand. Right? Okay, I understand that comment now much clearer, and I think our listeners would as well. Yeah. Okay, I think we were trying to keep this to a reasonable amount of time, but as usual, when we start talking, we can't stop. So, but I hope our now I was going to say our readers, but I have to change our definition. Automated building readers, and now they become our viewers. Traditionally, we have always let Control Trends do this, but I like the pattern that if any of our, anyone wants to interface with us in a video format, I'm pleased to do that.
Okay, this has been great, and great to chat with you, and look forward to your April edition, and for the next month as well. We're happy to do that.
And of course, we'll see you at noon Pacific Standard Time
Pacific.
On Monday live. And
Yes.
we've got Jim Young online too, so that's great.
Jim Young is joining us today. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
All right.
Great stuff.
Wonderful.